everyone. A very warm welcome to you all on this fine day. I'm pleased to welcome you to this session of the Women in Product Summit 2024. The Women in Product Summit, hosted by the Product Leaders Forum in partnership with the Institute of Product Leadership, presents a dynamic platform where we can all share our journeys, exchange insights, and acquire wisdom from some extraordinary leaders and feel inspired to push boundaries collectively. Our aim is to challenge conventional leadership norms, awaken your inner potential, and shape a future that resonates with your ambitions. My name's Arlene, and I'll be your host for today's session. The summit has consisted of 2 weeks of immersive online sessions up until now, and today's session will mark the start of the third and final week, ending with the grand finale of the in-person conference, which is on the 7th of April in CMRIT in Bangalore. We've been hearing from an array of inspirational women from all walks of life during the recent sessions, all of which will culminate into the one-of-a-kind experience at our in-person conference. We're here today for this session that is going to be delivered by the remarkable Miss Akhila Tadinada, who is the co-founder and chief technology officer of Xemelgo, on the topic of women entrepreneurs driving change in manufacturing tech. Our next and final virtual session of the Women in Product Summit 2024 will be taking place on Thursday, which is the 4th of April, where we will be hearing two entrepreneurs having a candid conversation about their entrepreneurial journeys as well. The cherry on top of it all is the grand finale of the in-person conference that will take place on the 7th of April, which is Sunday, in Bangalore. Our featured speakers, some of whom are visible on your screen, and we have many more, they're all inspirational women who will be sharing actionable perspectives on careers, products, and current challenges. The day promises to be power-packed with a unique experience that is designed to equip professionals with essential tools and knowledge for excellence in the professional landscape. You can find out more about the summit and the in-person conference by clicking the link in the chat window. Make sure to register quickly to secure your spot at this exclusive conference and be part of a supportive, ever-growing community. That was a little overview about the summit and its mission. Before I start today's insightful session, I'd like to give you a quick introduction to the host of the summit, the Product Leaders Forum. The Product Leaders Forum is a volunteer-powered non-profit organization crafted by practitioners for practitioners, with a global footprint encompassing chapters in Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, and Silicon Valley. It's a movement that's dedicated to product leadership. The forum's mission is to cultivate a vital and distinctive platform for product leaders worldwide. Through fostering diverse viewpoints and rich dialogue on product thinking, they aim to catalyze mindset shifts, unlock profound insights, and offer hands-on learning opportunities to enhance skills and foster peer-to-peer networks for continuous learning. You can find out more about the Product Leaders Forum by scanning the QR code that is visible on your screen. The summit is being organized by the Product Leaders Forum in partnership with the Institute of Product Leadership. The Institute of Product Leadership is Asia's first business school providing accredited degree programs and certification courses in product management, product leadership, data science, design, strategy, and leadership. The Institute has partnered with multiple universities. Being founded in 2012, the singular mission of creating 10,000 product leaders in the country. Ever since, the organization has designed and delivered programs in collaboration with various institutes, universities, and corporates to the senior working professionals to help them make career transitions into product leadership. The Institute has also built and developed a community of over 3,700 plus successful alumni that are leading the product, data, and design teams across the world. We're also knowledge partners for 250 plus organizations worldwide. You can find out more about the Institute and the programs offered on our website. You can find the link for the same in the chat window. Today's session is on women entrepreneurs driving change in manufacturing tech, where our speaker will share her journey and insights on being a women entrepreneur in the manufacturing industry. Once our speaker has presented her insights, we will open up for questions. You please keep your questions ready. You can post your questions on Zoom in the Q&A box. This session is being streamed live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So viewers on any of these channels, please feel free to post your questions in the comment section and we'll share them with our speaker. Here is some exciting news for all the attendees tonight. You have an opportunity to win a free digital course. As we will open up for the Q&A section after our speaker has presented her insights, the best asked question will get this reward. You can check out the array of courses offered by the Institute of Product Leadership with the link in the chat. The new age skills offered by the Institute are for every step of your career, and every course has been built, curated, and designed by industry practitioners. The winner of the best asked question today will get a course of their choice. So don't miss out on this opportunity, guys. Not only do you get to engage with our distinguished speaker, but you also stand a chance to win a digital learning course. So make sure to post your questions and interact with our speaker. Okay, then, without further ado, I'd like to kickstart this session by introducing and welcoming our distinguished speaker for today, Miss Akhila. Akhila, after spending 10 years working in big companies, decided to take the leap and get started on her entrepreneurial journey. Her interest in engineering was fueled by visits to the manufacturing plant her dad worked at during her childhood. She took all her learnings from the software world and decided to apply it to the place where her interest started, which is manufacturing. At Xemelgo, Akhila and her team look at the hardest problems facing the manufacturing industry today and apply the power of IoT and AI to solve them. Please do welcome you this evening, Akhila.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd also like to introduce and welcome our facilitator for today's session, Ms. Swati Setura. Swati has a decade and a half of experience as a software developer in virtual and cloud technology. She's a strategic leader with a special focus on customer experience and she's currently the senior staff software engineer at Spirent Communications. Please to welcome you as well, Swati.
Thank you, Harleen.
Great. I'll hand over the session to you both. We can.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Harleen. Welcome once again to the session, Akhila. Yeah, let's get started. I know Harleen gave a quick introduction, about how you got started, a very brief, one line of what started you on your entrepreneurial journey. So we would love to hear it from you. So my first question would be like, what influenced you to take this, route of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so thank you everyone, first of all, for having me. Appreciate. I think there were really big words used, distinguished. I don't think I'm any of that, but I would love to share, what sort of I've been through. So, like it was mentioned, I actually was working at Hitachi prior to doing this. And Hitachi, for folks that don't know, is a big Japanese industrial company. And I was actually on their software team, which was responsible for getting all of their machines connected, right? So their MRI machines, their excavators, bullet trains, pulling data off of that, and then running some AI and machine learning on that to figure out if we can proactively manage these machines. I think that's how I got my introduction to the space, which now is called Industry 4.0. There is the convergence of IT technology, OT technology. So fortunately for me, I got introduced to this very early on when the space was still being defined. I think 2012 is really when people came up with the term Industry 4.0, and that's really when I got into it. So, one of my previous bosses used to say, it's very rare in your career that you are there at the start of a trend, right? Where you get to sort of define what that industry is going to be. Usually we are catching the tail end of a trend, or we are in the middle of a trend where, the basics have already been defined and you're sort of just taking them forward. So I think for me, that was great because, I sort of got this worldview because at Hitachi, we had offices across the world. I went to Japan, I went to Germany, sort of got to see what was happening across the world and how people were attacking this problem. And I think that's really where sort of the seeds of it were there, saying, okay, this is a huge space. Nobody's really figured this out. There's enough sort of green field at this point of time that people can take and figure it out. Having said that, my dad worked in corporate his entire life, so I never thought of starting my own business. Like that was not something that even occurred to me. I would say my husband was a huge catalyst. He was always talking about, we should go try to do our own thing. And the idea actually came from my boss at that time, who said, hey, we should look to start to this company. I think you would do really great at it. Are you open to this idea? And for me, I would say personally, I like taking some challenges and risks, and this seemed like a good one. And of course, with my husband sort of really pushing me, my family really pushing me, I think that's really how it sort of came together. So I wouldn't say I decided to do this. I definitely love building products. I have done a lot of greenfield from scratch development throughout my career. So I knew that skill I had, but can that translate into business? I think a lot of things had to come together. I know my husband said at that time, he said, to have an idea which is big enough to start a company, to have a team that you trust, that wants to do this with you, and to also have the financial flexibility. I think, a lot of people say start this early on in your career. I don't think I had the money to start it early on in my career, right? So I had to work for 10 plus years to have enough financial flexibility to be able to do something like this. Like if you do, that's great for you. I just don't think I had that. So all of those things had to come together really for me to get started on this.
Yeah, I think I've heard this story, about your childhood and, how your dad influenced you. I would love for the audience to hear it as well. If you could just, spend a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say, so as Harleen was mentioning, so I grew up in a place called Jhansi in UP. My dad worked for BHL. So BHL makes these big locomotives, engines, turbines, and stuff. So for us, it was pretty great because we used to live in a township where everybody worked in the factory. All the communications were about the factory. So in a way, we sort of learned through osmosis, just learning about manufacturing and everything, because this was part of our daily lives. And there was this one day every year that the whole family got to see the factory, right? You could go to the factory, you could see how turbines were being built. You could see how engineering was being done. You could see engines being built. And now I realize, now when I go out, I realize, very few people had that opportunity to see, technology being built up front. But I guess we took it for granted because everybody got to go to the factory and everybody got to see what was going on. So I would say that was definitely key in sort of just influencing the power of building up technology and how that can really influence. And having said that, I think even my parents, my dad always asked us, both me and my sister, so we have two girls in our house, to set our aims really, really high. I think once, and nothing against any other profession, I went and said, hey, I want to do something else. And my dad said, you're smarter than that, right? So there was always this push to do your best and not compare yourself against anybody. I think which has really helped me now because when you become an entrepreneur, and I think we'll talk about it later on, about challenges and stuff. But it is important to sort of be confident enough in yourself and your skill set, because there is enough that's going to take you down. And then we'll probably talk about it later. So I think both my parents always asked us to like dream super high, super big. And then, there was always this seed of technology in our house. I think we're probably the first people to get computers in our house because our dad wanted us to be like super high tech from early on. Although we only played games, but I think just all of that access. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, So you were talking about the challenges, obviously, I'm sure you'd have faced like a ton of challenges in your journey to being an entrepreneur. So maybe you could share a few challenges and how you overcame them and how, those learnings are kind of shaping, the journey which you're on right now.
Yeah. I would say there's a lot of challenges because that's just your life. But I think since this is about women and women entrepreneurs, I guess one question is like, oh, what does it mean to be a woman entrepreneur? And I was thinking about this quite a bit as to like, what does it really mean? I'll talk about how I overcame it, but I would say initially when I started, it is the end customer really doesn't care. When you go to the customer, if you have a good product, if you offer a good service that they are willing to pay money for, of course, anytime I walk in, there's always this like initial like, oh, like, who are you? Right? How do we really place you? Like, do you know your job or not? And I think that's just because humans are used to pattern matching, right? Like my pattern when I buy from somebody is, say in the US, a white sales guy will show up, will try to sell me something, right? So when like a brown Asian woman shows up, you don't know, like, is she technical? I feel like sometimes when I would walk in, my co-founder is white, they would always think I'm his secretary. Like initially when you walked in, I don't think anybody says that, but like you can sort of sense that, right? They're all just trying to place you as to what are you, right? But then I think the minute you start talking and things like that, and eventually, again, I feel like customers are the easiest. A lot of people ask me, oh, you go to manufacturing, it's all men, and a lot of times they go to like Midwest in the US, like it's very different demographics. But I feel like that's been the easier part of it. But personally for me, because again, when a customer is buying something, again, think of it like you go to a shop and you're trying to buy like a bottle of shampoo, right? Do you care if it was made by a woman or a man? You really don't. If it's good shampoo, it's a good shampoo. You just buy it, right? Or even if it's a woman shopkeeper or a man shopkeeper, I don't think it really matters that much. Because yeah, I mean, it's a good chocolate, it's a good shampoo, it's a good laddu, whatever it is, you're just going to buy it, right? If the quality is good. I think where the challenge was for me to sort of believe in myself that I can do it. And I was looking around to see, okay, who are the other people and how they have done it? And there's very little of it out there, right? And then or even if I would go to like founder meetups, it was just very hard. It was usually just all men. And then you are trying to see yourselves in them. And you're like, but I don't look like them. And I also have two small kids. And a lot of people are talking about working 20-hour days. I can't work 20-hour days. I have to go feed my kids. Even if my husband's supportive, like I still would want to be with my kids, right? So I think that is where a lot of self-doubt came in, because I would go to these places and I was like, everybody who's successful doesn't look like me, right? Or I think investors is another very hard thing, right? Investors make their money on pattern matching. That's really what they're really, really good at, right? So again, I think for them to figure out if they want to place bets on you, from their perspective, they've never placed bets on anybody like you. So I think that's where it really comes up. I was also fundraising when I was pregnant. So it's just all of those things I think people are not used to seeing. So I think I actually stopped going to also the founder meetups. Nothing against them, but for me, it wasn't really working out because I felt like it wasn't helping me believe in myself, right? And know that I can do this. So anyway, that's a long drawn out answer. So I think, and as for challenges, I mean, as an entrepreneur, there is, you're trying to figure out product market fit. You're trying to convince customers to buy stuff. Managing money is a huge challenge that everybody needs to deal with. So, which is, I think anybody has to go through. But in addition, I would say these are some additional challenges. Yeah.
Okay, that's a new thing, the pattern matching. That's something that I didn't know about. So it's good to kind of.
So yeah, I mean, and I think you also realize that everything that we read in the media is, there's a certain prototype that the media likes to talk about. And I don't think I realized this early on too, right? There's a consumer, there's a nerdy sort of person that media really likes to hype up. And there are also certain people who love media hype, right? That go for it. But then there are these like just down to earth entrepreneurs, who are still managing families, who are just doing their job good. They just don't make for like good media stories. So they don't end up out there, right? And I think for me, a good part of this journey has been trying to meet those people and then realizing that, hey, not everybody looks the same, right? But what you read in the papers, what you read in blogs, what you see in news is a certain prototype that, of course, sells better, right? And so try and get rid of all of that conditioning and then say, hey, this is not the only type that works. There are other types also that work. I think was a good like first 3 years is that's all it took like to get rid of all of that conditioning.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway for people who want to be on that entrepreneurial journey. Just don't look at what's been done before. Try to move away from the conventional. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So Akhila, Xemelgo's focus has always been on solving for the manufacturing industry. So you kind of briefly spoke about it, but what sparked the idea for using IoT to solve your customers' problems?
Right. Yeah. So like I said, there is a convergence of technologies happening, right? And I think the example that I always use for people like, why is Xemelgo, why now, is there's a very famous Jeff Bezos thing where he says, Amazon wouldn't have happened if internet was not widely available, where people were not using internet, credit cards were not there, where online payments could be done, right? And people were comfortable enough with buying things online. And a logistics supply chain was available where we could fly and ship things, right? All of those things had to come together before something like an Amazon could happen. I think what for us at Xemelgo, IoT had to become cheap enough, I would say, cost effective enough, where sensors are cost effective, where people want to use them widely. Sensors have been around forever, radio frequencies and things have been used since World Wars. But it was really like military technology for a really long time. And so for them to become consumer has taken a really long time. And then I think cloud had to become prevalent. Like even when I was at Hitachi, we were only building on premise, right? To get the petabytes of data that sensors are going to send you and have to put up mainframe systems on site to like manage that, only the most expensive, the most, Fortune 100s can really afford that. And then I think mobile phones, had to be available where people can access the insights that is coming from it and machine learning, of course. So I think a convergence of these four technologies had to happen where it's cost effective. Even as 2015 is not too far away. I remember having conversations with customers in 2015 saying, would you be okay with buying like SaaS software running in the cloud? And most manufacturers' answer was no, we won't do it. It's too, it's not secure for us. And now we're in 2024 where all major ERP systems, MES systems, everything is running in the cloud, right? So I think that one part of it was the timing had to be right? As for what we're exactly building, I think when we left, like we're all technologists, like our team is all people who've been in engineering. We knew that we wanted to build something in this space. I don't think we exactly knew what we wanted to build. And I think that's true of all entrepreneurs in general, because you come in with an idea and then you go validate and you figure out, and that's the whole product market fit journey, right? That everybody has to go through. I don't think we exactly knew what that product was going to be that we were going to build. All we knew was that these technologies are now mature enough and cost effective enough that we can start applying them at scale. I think the other insight that we sort of had was, again, to use an analogy, like, internet was great, but till you got email or web browsing or all of these applications, people didn't know what to do with the internet. I think that was a little bit of the case with Internet of Things. Also, IoT is everybody was touting the technology, but there was no killer apps for it, right? So the other insight that we had was that if we can actually build some killer applications, that go with it, that enable manufacturers to really use it, And again, I think if you look at manufacturing companies, they have a lot of really strong mechanical engineers, people who know how to build things. They're not like traditionally software. They don't have like 100 software engineers sitting on their team, right? So somebody needs to build an app for them, which is useful for them. So I would say those were sort of the key insights that we went in with. But after that, we just did a lot of discovery. Like we were on the road a ton, just driving to manufacturers, asking them, what is it that would work for? And then we would build prototypes, we would show them prototypes, PowerPoint, like all of that, just trying to validate the idea. And then what really came out of it was customers asking us for operational visibility. So they were saying, I'm running these operations, but in real time, I don't know where anything is. I don't know what my real-time status of my job is. I don't know if it's going to get done on time. I don't know if it was shipped accurately. And the reason for that is the only way somebody can know that is for some person to manually go and enter data into a system and say, I worked on this, I did this, I did that. So as great as the ERP systems are, the challenge is always you're still dependent on the human to go tell them, right? What we say in our team is like, even if you sneeze, you need to go tell the system that I did this. That's the only time it's going to know that something happened. And so we want to flip that and we want to say, hey, Mr. Operator, you do your job. I will use sensors. I will use Sentinel information to collect information on what the progress of the job is. And then I can build data and insights on top of that. So that's, I would say, in a nutshell, how we arrived at what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah, I think you also mentioned that, IoT was touted as this transformative technology. Yeah. How has the adoption been, generally in the market?
Like I said, a few things had to come together for the technology to like really take off, and which basically happens for any new technology, right? There is the hype curve, and then the hype curve goes down, and there is the winter where everybody thinks this is useless, you can't do anything with it, and then there is really the applications that start to come together, right? Which brings it up. And I mean, I think there's also just physical things, right? Like, so for IoT to really be prevalent in manufacturing, for example, people needed to have really good networking infrastructure in factories, which wasn't a thing before, right? People weren't trying to put Wi-Fi throughout the facility or put Ethernet throughout the facility. That wasn't a requirement. But now as Wi-Fi is becoming, better, I mean, there was just physical challenges with when you have walls that are that thick, with so much metal out there, Wi-Fi wouldn't work. There would be just too many dark spots, right? So people had to get over that hump also in order to enable really strong signals throughout so that you can put sensors throughout. It's almost like if you look at how Google Maps came together, right? There had to be like enough satellite information. Your phones had to have accelerometers. You needed to have, these traffic monitoring systems that you can tap into. And that's really when you can build something like Google Maps on your phone that can then tell you, at what pace you're going and what issues you have. So I think now that those sort of physical challenges had been solved, and also in manufacturing, sensors would actually get blocked by metal. Like if you want to put an RFID tag on metal, that wouldn't work because the chip would get blocked. So all of that has sort of been resolved, I would say, in the last decade or so, right? And so the hype curve started in 2012. A lot of these issues sort of came to front. People started to really work on it, started to resolve it. And at this point of time, we have people tagging like things which go in cryogenic freezers and things like that, and the tags still survive. We have people tagging things that go into ovens. The tags are still okay, and networking infrastructure is available. So now is really the time when it's starting to take off. I think I was just reading some study which said in the business world, they think only about 0.1% of things are tagged by sensors right now. And they believe that there's so much that needs to be that potential that's out there, right? So I don't remember the exact numbers, but right now it's about a couple of billion items which are tagged, and they're expecting like hundreds of billions or trillions of items to be tagged in the next few years. So it's really going to now start to take off. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So how has Xemelgo been trying to take on these adoption challenges, and how are you trying to overcome? There is a certain barrier of entry, right?
Yes.
In some cases.
Yes.
So how are you kind of solving for those?
Yeah, so I think the one thing that we learned early on, and we took this approach where we only started working with really small companies earlier to start with. And there was a reason for that, because when I was at Hitachi, we were working with, certain federal governments and big car manufacturers and all of that. And we realized a lot of those were ending up as science projects, right? You would try something out, it wouldn't work, it would fail. So we deliberately took this approach of going to like really small mom and pop sort of factories, because we said if we build something where this guy is even willing to pay $100 for it, then there is value in it, right? Because small companies, I mean, I being a small company, I know we have no time for anything unless it really, really adds value to us. So, which sort of forced us to make the software drop dead simple, really, really quick to install, really, really like we would time ourselves, right? Like you literally have like 2 hours to convince a small company that this is useful. Anything more than 2 hours, they are out, like because they have customers to do and things like that. So we had to go in and within 2 hours have this whole system up and running. And if they could see value in those 2 hours, then yes, we can move to the next step, right? So early on, that sort of forced us to really think about like, how do we simplify deployment? How do we simplify the app? Like, how do we simplify the interface so that no training is needed? And really, really listening to the customer. Like we would just stay on factory floors. Like we would go there. If they're opening their factory at 5 a.m., we would go there at 5 a.m. We would just sit there at 5 a.m., see what the person is doing. And I would say if there's one thing that people want to get away from this conversation is when you are building a new product, that is what is needed. Like you need to be right next to the customer, really trying to understand what, I mean, even just small things like we initially had like a button which was like really small, like plus button, right? Because we thought it looked cute on the app and it's mobile app and, we don't want to do big buttons and things like that. And then we went on to the factory and people who build stuff, their fingers actually end up becoming bigger because you're trying to like build stuff throughout the day. There's older people, whose vision is probably not as strong. A lot of people are carrying parts in their hands, so they don't have like, a lot of hand space to use a mobile app. And it turned out nobody could use that plus button, right? As cute as it was, because it just didn't physically work for them. So then, since then, we've said only big buttons, only prominent buttons, big text, and like very, very little text that people have, and very little that somebody has to enter, right? It's a small example, but that's what it took. It took tons of iterations, tons of being on factory floors, tons of watching their process flows to really figure out how to build these apps so that now when we go there, people are like, oh, like, have you been to my factory? Like, how do you know that this works this way? No, I've not been to your factory, but I've been to hundreds of others, right? And so I think that's really what it's taken, of course, with the insight that, operational visibility is what people are looking for. And then being able to translate that into very quick, easy turnkey apps that people can redeploy very, very quickly and get up and running quickly. I think that's what's helped reduce the adoption curve. So now, even if we go to bigger companies, we've sort of tried and tested this so many times that for us to do big stuff is also fast enough, right? The challenge with any new technology is if the customer has to spend a lot of time learning it, understanding it, figuring it out, you've already lost them at that point of time. They're like, I could be using this time, going back to my Excel file and putting this data in an Excel file and running pivot tables on that, right? Because that's what they're used to. And everybody wants to do what they're comfortable with. Very few people want to move on to like what they're not comfortable with. So you have to make it, I think, what do they say? It has to be a 10x improvement. Otherwise, nobody wants to do it.
Right. I think what you're saying is user experience is a big part of,
yes.
Not just solving the customer's problems, but how you're doing it matters. Like small things.
And particularly for us, because we're working with factory floor operators, if they find this tech intimidating, they don't want to use it.
Right.
And I think that's another insight. If anybody wants to start their own business, is there's a lot of traditional industries which have really bad software. So if it's hard to get into these industries, but if you can crack it, I mean, you are the only one, right? You could have like build that whole business out there. So yeah, if you're looking to do something, find a super, super old industry that nobody is building any software for. Just go build that.
Right. Yeah. Manufacturing being one of the oldest. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, Akhila, my next question is, what are some of the benefits that IoT offers to businesses and consumers? Like, can you walk us through some real world applications to help us understand, the technology and how it's being used better?
Sure. Yeah, I would say the most relevant answer probably would be, so we do a lot of inventory tracking. And let me give you an example of how inventory tracking normally works. In a factory or even in a retail store or logistics store, people actually go about manually counting stuff, right? And because that's the only way to know at the end of year inventory how much you really have. I think I once went to a factory where I usually used to go visit these guys. That day I go, there's a huge chain in the bill. I'm not like making this up. Like the whole entrance, there was a huge chain saying nobody can enter. And I was like, what's going on? They're like, oh, we're doing our audit and we don't want anybody entering because we don't want items leaving, going in and out, right? That's really like how complicated it gets for these guys, because even though people are like barcoding or maybe saying, I took this, I took that, that data is never accurate. Like you can have, even for a mid-sized company, almost $1 million worth of inventory, which is unaccounted. That's on the lower end, right? It could be even more. And the reason for that is this, right? Somebody has to go manually count all of these things. They have to keep track of it. They're putting it in an Excel file. Then they go enter that. It could be anywhere from, some companies shut down for a week every year to do their inventory. Some companies do it on a monthly basis where they have a day on a month. Some companies do it daily where they do portions of it, but it's never super accurate. And then there are companies who just offer this as services. There are companies who will just count on your behalf for you and make sure you're stocked. And you pay like millions of dollars to these companies because they're like somebody like a Lockheed Martin or any big company. They basically outsource their inventory management. And those are $100+ million contracts where people are coming and counting and stocking things for you, right? That's the magnitude of the problem that we are talking about here, right? And still, people don't have accurate inventory, right? And what does that mean? Okay, I don't have accurate inventory. Maybe that's not a huge problem. I can write it off or something. The challenge is if you don't know how much raw material you have, you can't ensure that you're going to deliver to your customer on time. If you can't deliver to your customer on time, you don't get paid on time, right? You can't meet your contract. So it has a snowball effect, right? Once you start with it. You think you have so much finished goods inventory, you go ahead and sign off a contract. And then, the customer says, I need 50 of these. You go figure out you only have 20 in stock, right? And now you can't fulfill your contract and you have to expedite and things like that. So what we've done is now we actually put sensors on, and these are in a lot of cases RFID tags, or you can use a lot of different things that we apply on all the items. And then we create something like a smart stock room. So as you actually have readers at the entrances. So as items are entering or leaving the room, you keep track of everything which is going in and out in real time. So in real time, I actually know what my inventory count is at this point of time without anybody having to manually go count this. And then once I have this data, then I can actually accurately start to predict my consumption. I know what my real-time consumption is. I can start to build machine learning models on that. I can start to do more accurate forecasting. Once I can do more accurate forecasting, I can actually get better deals from my suppliers to make sure that I'm accurately counting for stuff, right? So that's how IoT can really change just for this one particular application, where now I have real-time inventory at any point of time because the sensors are keeping track of it, and then I can use that for figuring out from a business perspective how I should be managing it.
Yeah, I think we had a question from the audience about how you keep track of real-time inventory. I know we said we'll take the questions at the end, but this is like very relevant.
Yeah, so like I said, in this case, you're basically using sensors to keep real-time track of inventory. So I think an easy way to explain it is think of air tags, right? I mean, now everybody is familiar with air tags. You take something like an air tag and you apply it to all of your inventory. And now I can ping it throughout the day and say, are you here? in the stock room, that means, I have enough inventory. If you're not there in the stock room, that means that's been consumed. I need to go replenish it, right? So air tags is, I would say, what everybody's familiar with, but there's a lot of different types of tagging technology like that that people can use for keeping real-time track of inventory.
Great. Yeah. While we're talking about IoT and, how technology, so how do you envision, like, how do you see the IoT landscape evolving? And, as a co-founder and an entrepreneur, how do you keep track of, latest innovations and
Right.
fast-paced technological changes, AI and everything that's coming in?
Yeah, I think we all have to figure it out, right? So I think for IoT technology itself, how is it going to evolve? One, I think the cost of it is coming down so much. Right now, I think you're probably at 10 cents, for a tag, and it's supposed to go down to 5 cents in the next 5 years and like 1 cent, in the next 10 years or so, at which point of time you can really apply it to anything. And there's going to be so many applications. I think one interesting application I saw when I was visiting a lab at Hitachi was there was a chip in the cap of your milk bottle, and that chip could actually keep track of if the milk is good or bad, right? If the milk has gotten spoiled or not. And they were going to use that for, transportation, because a lot of times food is wasted through transportation, right? When the temperature is not accurate on the truck or the storing areas and things like that. And so they could really like monitor that in the trucks, in the storage areas and things like that to ensure that less food is wasted, right? Which can really help with all the global sort of food shortage problems and things like that. So I think just pure innovation in sensor technology is really going to change how things are done on that front. That combined with machine learning and AI, so for factories or for manufacturing, for the longest time, you can't go to, say, Kaggle and download a data set for how a factory runs, right? And what these sensors are really helping us understand is how exactly does a factory run? Not, somebody telling you that this is my process, but really being able to see, it takes 20 minutes to do this, 15 minutes to do this. Here's what my real-time consumption is. Here's what it takes to ship this product. Once you have that data, like optimizing your supply chain, which is, again, with the whole global disruptions in supply chains and things like that, really knowing, I saw this beautiful, I get excited by these things, but chart where somebody had talked about, hey, a container is shipping from China. When exactly is it going to come to you? Where is your pallet on that container? When is it going to arrive to you? When can you start planning your supply chain? When can you start delivering? And then actually being able to tell the end customer that, hey, I'm going to have this, in 2 days. Today, manufacturers, when you ask them when you're going to get done with stuff, they say in the next 3 weeks. But their end customers are saying, if Amazon can tell me this is 8 steps away, why can't you tell me this is 8 steps away, right? Because a lot of times, because their supply chain is complicated, but once these things really get connected, you're going to see a huge optimization of the entire sort of supply chain, which is why it's called the fourth industrial revolution, is because anytime, what is an industrial revolution? It's really when you can take the efficiency levels for a supply chain or to the next level. And so once these things really start to come together, I mean, blockchain is going to play a huge part, because supply chains, how do you securely share data between vendors? And you will need blockchain as a part of that. You will need machine learning to understand, what this data is telling you. So all of these technologies, as they mature, you will see a very sophisticated supply chain operation that people can, run simulations on and figure out how to optimize even before doing the optimization for the supply chain itself.
Okay, yeah, I think with machine learning and AI, you guys have like tons of data. It's just,
yes,
it probably comes down to how you make sense of, cut through all the noise and make sense of what you really need.
Yeah, I mean, noise is a huge problem when it comes to sensors. And yeah, so that is a big area for us that we need to invest in. So to reduce the amount of noise, because the sensor essentially is dumb. It sends a message and it's over, right? You need to see if it's a valid message, not a valid message. How do you use other data points? So noise elimination is a huge area that we're working on. I think your other question was, how do you keep up with technologies? I mean, I would say no good answer, like podcasts, books, talking to people. Yeah, just trying to read up as much as you can. But then I think also trying to like connect that to what the end customer is asking for, right? The technology is only as good as, if it doesn't really work for the end customer, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's still in research phase. So keeping track of research, but then also knowing like if it's mature enough to the point that you can really bring it out to the end customer.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Akhila, we've spoken a lot about the product side of things.
Yeah.
This being a women in product series, I wanted to kind of bring the focus back to the women in product part. So coming back to your personal journey, have there been any instances where you felt your gender played a role, either positively or negatively?
Right.
And how did you kind of navigate those? I know you said, you did talk about it a little earlier, but
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I would want to talk about the positive side of it. And again, this is, I think, my own, I guess, impression of it. I mean, people would think of it differently. But like I was saying, I always joke with my friends. I say, I think people think smarter than what I am, because when I walk in, they're not really expecting me to know my stuff, right? And then when I start talking and they're like, oh, she really knows her stuff, then I think if it was a guy, they expect it out of him. I don't think people really expect it out of me. So I use it to my advantage, right? Because when I go in and people are not really expecting me to know stuff, then I can really own the floor, and I can really put my vision out there, and I can really try to sell people. And sometimes, like I said, they're pleasantly surprised, and they're like, there have been instances where people will text my co-founder and say, oh, she was really smart. And I don't think he said anything different than I did, but I think it's just that people don't expect me to know what I'm talking about, right? So I completely use it to my advantage, right? Like I walk in, I can sense the room, I can sense that they're not fully convinced. And then when I really start talking, then everybody starts gravitating to me, asking me questions. So then I completely use it to my advantage. Of course, I didn't do this on day one. I would always walk into a room extremely nervous, thinking they were not going to know. But I think the more that it happened, I was like, okay, fine, I'm just going to use it to my advantage. And anytime, people ask me this too, they're like, oh, how do you deal with it? I said, everybody else is anyways thinking, that you may not know your stuff, right? So why burden yourself with that too, right? You might as well just say, okay, I'm going to play it the other way. And sometimes, yeah, I just have fun with it, because I walk into meetings and I know people will think that I don't know it, and then I go for it. And yeah, it helps convincing people the other way sometimes, faster than. And me and my co-founder, we always do this. When we go try to sell to a customer, we always try to figure out who's going to map the best, like him or me. And we map it that way, and then we go for it, right? So sometimes you just got to have fun with it. You can always get yourself down and be like, oh my God, nobody's going to buy from me. I don't fit in, da, 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 da. At some point of time, I think you need to flip it too.
Okay, I think that's great advice for anybody in general, right?
Yeah.
So,
in specific instances, I don't know if I can remember specific instances. Also, maybe as a person, I try not to let it get to me too much. So I sort of erase it. But yeah, I don't think so. I feel like it's, as long as, you have something valuable to say, people are willing to hear.
Yeah. So, what would you tell, if women want to pursue entrepreneurship, what do you think is holding them back, and what would you kind of, tell them, how they can overcome it and, take the plunge into the entrepreneurial journey?
So I would say I have two things. And again, this is stuff that I've read and learned. So one thing that I read somewhere which really made a difference to me, and they said, as an entrepreneur, what's your biggest competitive edge? It's actually you. Because nobody can think like you, nobody can build like you, nobody can say what you say, right? So the more your business reflects your true self, the greater your competitive edge is, because you're really not copying anybody. It's just you, right? And that's what you're putting forward, which I thought was very profound. again, I didn't come up with it, somebody smarter than me said this, because as women, we have a very different vantage point to things, right? So if you can really hone in on your vantage point to stuff, you can really stand out in terms of what you have to offer, right? Because nobody else is going to come in and think about it that way. Like in our team, we really place a lot of emphasis on listening to the end customer, right? Just shut up and listen. And I think some of that has come from just us as people. We're curious about what the other person has to say, right? And I think that's become a DNA which has helped us establish ourselves slightly differently than everybody else, because if you talk to our customers, they'll say, these guys really listen to what we have to say, right? And it's these subtle things which can really make you stand apart sometimes. So I think that's one part of it. I think the second part of it is there is so many problems that need to be solved, there's this thing they say about Silicon Valley that developers only build for developers. People are not really, Silicon Valley needs to go outside and look at problems that other people are having, right? I think it's the same thing. Like, you at home will see things that need to be done better. Nobody else is seeing that stuff, right? And if you're starting a business, like that really makes sense. I was listening to the Mama Earth co-founder, and she was saying, like, she was trying to find a shampoo for her baby, right? And she couldn't really find a shampoo, right? And she decided to build it. Nobody else will have that insight. You will have that insight because you are at home, you're taking care of your baby, and you're trying to find a shampoo for your baby, right? So there's a great co-founder here in the Seattle area. She built a startup for menopausal women, which I thought was brilliant, right? And she's done so well. Nobody's talking about menopause in women, or even like, premenstruation or teenage girl issues and things like that, right? So if you have a specific vantage point from which you can see problems that other people can't, then you should definitely take a leap, because I think the world is a better place for that. There is, again, not trying to sound too technical, but somebody was building this like pap smear instrument, right? And a lot of men were building it and women were not building it. And they were like, but men don't understand what it feels like. Like, women should be building this stuff, right? So there is a lot of this kind of stuff which even us as women, as families, would do better if more women use their vantage point to build businesses, right? And looked outside and brought their unique sort of perspective to it. So that it's not just things that are being built for a certain section of the population. And that's what ends up happening. A certain section of the population is getting funded. A certain section of the population is getting products built for them. A certain section of the population is the one that's getting the advantage of these products, right? But there's a huge subsection which is getting ignored. And I think that's really where women need to step in and pull in their vantage point.
Right. I think what you're saying is take advantage of the unique perspective, that we bring in, and put aside the fear and use that to your advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's I think great advice. Yeah. So you did speak about podcasts, and I've seen your LinkedIn posts. You do sometimes write about summary of books and what you've read. So could you tell us about some of the podcasts or books that you would recommend, for people who want to get started on this journey, or for generally women in product in general?
Yeah, so I think, and I'll share links afterwards. So my favorite sort of entrepreneur ones, there's a podcast called How I Built This by Guy Raz. And he just talks about anything and everything, like people who have built protein bars to people who have like built these large scale businesses. So it just gives you a very interesting perspective on what it takes to build businesses. I think that's a really good one that I like. Think School from India, I think that's great. I love their stuff. There's an episode on Haldirams and how Haldirams came together. If people have not seen it, I highly encourage it. Like, talk about product market fit. It took like 3 generations of family to find product market fit, and then, take it further and expand it. I think, and again, this goes back to like what we read in the media is just like, overnight successes and things like that. That's very, very rare. It's not sustainable. But if you listen to, how people build like Haldirams, there's one on like Cycle Agarbatti. These are just like such great stories. Also about like getting insight, like how do you find an insight? How do you build on that insight? So Think School, I think, is really great. Um, a book that I really like is Founders at Work. So if you're doing a tech startup, Founders at Work is really good. It talks about the people that built Excel, all of that stuff, right? So I think that one's great. There's another one called Crossing the Chasm. I'm guessing they teach it probably in the Product Institute. Particularly, yeah, if you're building products where the market is not established. There's two ways of building product, right? There's one like, say, um, I want to build a better CRM. There's already CRM, the market is established. I'm going to build a better, cheaper CRM, right? How you sell that stuff is slightly different versus when the market doesn't exist, the product doesn't exist, you're trying to build a market. I think in that case, something like a Crossing a Chasm, which is super helpful to understand how you can like define the market, build the market, get the early people, build on that momentum, and then how do you really cross the chasm? So I can share more. And I think Acquired is another podcast that I very religiously listen to.
Yeah, I think that those are great recommendations. I want to go back and look at the Haldirams video now. The thing you mentioned about.
Yeah, that's definitely a personal favorite of mine. Yeah.
Okay, so we are almost coming to the end of the session, Akhila. But this is something that I wanted to ask you. You have two girls, and I've seen you bake birthday cakes for them from scratch, and you do it like seemingly effortlessly, but I use the word seemingly, very heavily. Yeah. So how do you kind of find that balance?
Right. I know when you put that question out there, I was trying to think about it. I think for me as a person, I feel like doing this after I had kids is better. And I'll tell you why, because before I had kids, I remember like I'd go to work, some issue would happen at work. I would come back and I would just like mull on it and mull on it. And I just couldn't like get over it. And now, like, I could have the biggest financial crisis happening in the company. But at 5:30, I have to feed my kids. They want to tell me something about what happened in their day. Like yesterday, I had a big investor meeting and we were having dinner. And I was trying to tell them, like, hey, I had this like big investor meeting. And so both of them are thinking about, okay, if I put up a lemonade stand, how do you think I can fund my lemonade stand, right? And they were just having that conversation. So I think for me personally, just because I didn't know how to create the barrier, right? So I think my kids really help, right? Where they just put everything in perspective, right? They don't make me take myself too seriously, my problems too seriously, what's going on too seriously. So I'm able to like disconnect, a little bit more when I sort of am with them, right? And I think that again, entrepreneurship, I'm not a great sprint runner. I'm a good marathon runner. Right? I get up at the same time every day. I sleep at my husband says I'm like a PT teacher. I get up at the same time every day. I sleep at the same time every day. Eat the same food every day. All of that stuff. So for me, being able to sustain my energy, and I think a lot will take you down during entrepreneurship. So having the mechanisms to still show up every day, right? And I think for me, my family sort of does that for me. So I feel like if I was not a mom, if I didn't have kids, I don't think I could have sustained this because I would have overthought everything so much and then completely dissipated my energy, right? So I think that's one part of it. The other advice that I got from a mentor was that when you are a leader, it's more about energy management than time management. So when I show up for a meeting, I'm asked, my team is looking for me to make decisions. And if I show up to a meeting, I'm distracted, I can't make decisions, I can't think clearly, any of that, then I'm not really doing what's supposed to, right? What I'm supposed to. So I've really tried to focus on that. I do a lot of yoga. I think that to me, yoga is a huge, huge savior for me. So, which is why this whole sleep on time, get up on time sort of stuff, I guess, works. But yeah, I mean, my husband is more than 50% help. He's when I'm down, he helps me. He's the one who encouraged me. There is so many times through all of this where he could have said, dude, let's not do this, right? But he's always been like, it's okay. go for it, go for it, go for it. Financially, emotionally, like I think that's a huge help. So I don't think I have the magic pill here, but this is sort of how I guess it works for me. Yeah.
All right, that's great advice. I think makes sense, a lot of sense. So thank you, Akhila. I really enjoyed
Those are really great questions. I think Swati should get the best.
Yeah. So I'll let Harleen, take over and ask some questions from the audience.
Thank you both. Thank you, Swati, for facilitating that. And thank you, Akhila, for your insights and answers. It's been very thought provoking and insightful. We have a question from Shreya, who has asked, how do you keep track of real time inventory?
Yeah, I think I sort of mentioned that. So yeah, it's kind of like using something like air tags, right, to keep track of what exactly is there in a particular location, and then building business logic on top of it to know how much inventory is there. And I'm happy to sort of connect offline and talk more about it too.
Okay, great. Thank you. Shreya's also asked, do you prefer incurring third-party license costs or undertaking direct infra cost for IoT?
So our business model is essentially we go through partners. So I'm not sure exactly which third-party cost you're talking about, but we do buy off-the-shelf sensors, and then we package them, and then we sell it to end customers. Again, building sensors is not our expertise, so we prefer to partner on that. Really building the software is our expertise, so that's what we bring to the picture. So the way we think about our go-to-market or business model is like Windows with all of these hardware companies. Like we are the operating system, and then the operating system can work with an IBM PC or a Dell PC or a Lenovo PC, and we just need to make sure it's compatible with everything.
Okay, great. Thank you. On Zoom, those are the only questions we've received. And also, I think the fact that it was such a conversation, people were more engrossed in, listening to you guys converse as opposed to, come up with questions themselves. So I will urge everyone, if you have any more questions, I think this is the best time to ask them. Otherwise, I think we can start wrapping up soon. Let's wait for a couple of more minutes. Until then, I want to thank you for being here, Akhila, and giving us your valuable time and sharing all your thoughts and insights in your journey. We've really appreciated having you with us. It's been a complete pleasure. Please accept this certificate of appreciation from Women of Product Summit. The QR code on the certificate will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page that has been created for you, which will have the recording of this session. We will also share the recording of this session on our YouTube channel. Thank you, Akhila, for joining us today. It's been a great pleasure. I think we don't have any other questions come in, so I think we can wrap up. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Akhila. Thank you, Swati. But we did say, someone gets to win the reward for best asked question. I'm going to go ahead and say I think the winner for that should be Shreya Bhutani, because she's, yeah? Okay, great. Thank you, Akhila. Congratulations, Shreya. We'll be getting in touch with you regarding the further steps. Congratulations on winning a digital course from the Institute of Product Leadership. Okay, great. Thank you, Swati and Akhila. You guys have been great. It's been a wonderful conversation to listen to.
Thank you, Akhila.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Swati.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, great. Thank you to all our attendees for being here. I'm sure you've all had an insightful and productive time at this session. You can get ready for the next session, which also promises to be very valuable, which is taking place on this Thursday evening, on the 4th of April, between two entrepreneurs about how they navigated their entrepreneurial journeys as well. As mentioned before, the most exciting element of this summit will be our in-person conference that is taking place on this Sunday, that is the 7th of April. The summit promises to be an enriching day, creating a limelight for these and our other speaker women to share their journeys and impart their insights to provide us all with a platform to collectively learn and grow and network with like-minded people. Join us to hear from these and many more inspirational women. You can find the link to the website in the chat window. I want to thank you all again for being here and giving us your valuable time. I'll wait here to let all our attendees to go ahead and scan the QR codes on the screen and leave any reviews, feedbacks, or queries. I'll wait here for a couple of seconds so you guys can go ahead and scan the QR code on the screen. We'd love to hear about your experience at today's session. So please go ahead and scan the QR code and leave a short, review or just how your experience at today's session was. We would appreciate that. Okay, great. I think that brings us to a close for today. It's been a pleasure having all of you here with us today, and I look forward to hosting you at the next session on this Thursday evening and hopefully also seeing you on Sunday. On that note, I'll end today's session. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Great rest of the evening.